Waiting for YouTube to catch up. Hey everyone, welcome to another Training Friday edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today in her first flight on Training Friday is Brooke Cheney. Brooke is, of course, a Great Start Shooting School out of Connecticut. She is a firearms trainer. She's going to be an EMT very soon. Also, she is, as you can see just off her shoulder there, she is the, and I want to make sure I'm getting this right, she's the Assistant Director for Connecticut for the DC project. Do I have that right?
Yes. Long ago, when Diana made me the director of the DC project here in Connecticut, I said yes, until we find someone who's even more excited about doing it than I am. And luckily for us, Mary Forges came along. And last year, about a year ago now, almost, I was on vacation. I'm like, so, you want to be director? She said yes. I'm like, yay! So I'm super happy to be the assistant director for a DC project.
You know, I had Mary on the Polite Society podcast. Oh, I suppose it's been about 6 months. That woman has a story. And she's a great interview, and I hope she does very, very well for the DC project in Connecticut. And honestly, nationally, you guys are not all that far, truck driver speak, from DC. You're certainly closer than South Dakota is. But I'm hoping that Mary can continue to make a difference in Connecticut and in Washington, D.C. So
absolutely. And she's super excited, so it helps.
Yes.
Even though she's a crazy single mom, all of those things. But that's why I'm still part of it, help her wherever she needs.
Very cool. Well, today is Training Friday, and the topic we kind of picked out today was this. You got a gun. You've decided that I may be okay, but I'd like to get better with my gun, so I'm going to get some training. Is there a secret sauce? Is there something that individuals can do when they've decided to get training? How do they get the most out of that training? How do you prepare for it?
All right. So one of the biggest things is to figure out what you actually want to train on. So many people are like, I want to save my life with my firearm. And it's just like, okay, that makes sense. But what does that actually mean? What are the pieces and parts? Now, for those of you who've never seen me before, I am a competitive shooter, and I originally was just a scared mom with guns in the closet that I didn't know how to touch safely. So no matter what your level of experience, before you go looking for training, really decide, what do you want to learn? Self-defense is a portion of what you need to learn, but the basics are always the basics. Whether you want to do competition, self-defense, just get better at the range in general. It's kind of like sit down and really figure out, what do I want? Because once you figure out what you want, then you can figure out where you want to go. And I think the biggest thing that I had that was overwhelming when I started was I had no idea how to find training. And now that I've been to where I've been, I realized that, wow, if someone had just told me, what do I want to learn? And that would help me start looking.
Yes, absolutely. There are some great all-around courses that you can get, and things like the Masada U Group Mag 40. I will never not recommend somebody attend that. It's a fantastic all around, and even if you're a flat beginner and have only fired a few magazines through a semi-auto or emptied the chamber on your revolver maybe 5 or 6 times, even that little amount of experience, you've got enough to take a Mag 40. And those are, again, they're all around classes, but yeah, there are trainers that specialize in competition. There are trainers that specialize in just self-defense. There's all kinds of training out there. So I agree with you. If you know what you want to do with your firearm, that's a great start to finding the training path you need to go to.
And see, I work it out so people say a great start all the time.
There you go.
But the other thing, like, I didn't realize when I was starting to look for training as I'm afraid to touch a gun, I don't know anything about it, was it didn't occur to me to pick up the phone. and give them a call, because when you're brand new and you know nothing, then you may not even know what you really need to know. So picking up the phone and calling a trainer is absolutely something that I never considered when I was going to go shooting. And it's like I was lucky enough to find Deb Ferns and Babes with Bullets as my first training camp that I left my children for the first time since they were born, to go to Arizona to go train with those lovely, spectacular ladies. You know, that Kay Michelik lady, some people know her name, I don't know. But so picking up the phone and asking questions, because there is such a wide variety of what you're going to find. As a female, looking for female instructors has become so much easier. A girl and a gun is one of the easiest ways to find a bunch of female instructors. Mm-hmm. And just because you're a girl doesn't mean you have to have a girl instructor. But I've found a lot of people come to my school because that's what they're looking for. They're like, oh, it's so cool that you're a girl and you're an instructor. And I'm like, I just don't think of it, but it's exciting for some. So picking up the phone and asking questions, because I just remember looking for training and be like, all right, let's see. This says I need to be able to do blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't even know what blah, blah, blah is. So pick up the phone and call them, because that's what we are here for, to find out if we're a good fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And believe me, if you're wanting to sign up for a very advanced class and you're a beginner and you tell them that, they're gonna point you in the right direction when you call them. They're not going to put you in an advanced class that you're not ready for. At least the good trainers won't.
Exactly. I'm actually running a instructor training class in January, and I make you apply for the class, and you have to pass the shooting portion before you can apply the teaching portion, because I don't want you to spend $350 with me 2.5 days and then not pass the class. And I've had people apply and they're like, oh, I didn't want to do that because I just want to come and get it over with. And then after they came in and they did the pre-qualification, like, this is awesome. I'm so glad that you're doing this, because now I know what I need to work on. Or for those who passed, they're just happy that they got to find out what to expect for the class. So that helps as well.
Yeah. I want to get this comment up here real quick. And by the way, if you want to comment on anything you hear about, if you're watching on the Polite Society podcast feeds, either Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and comment on that video. I get those comments almost right away. I'll get them up on the air as soon as there's a break in conversation. If you're watching anywhere else, if you catch us on OpsLens or anywhere else that picks us up, go to Twitter and tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. We get those just as fast, and I'll get them up just the same. I made a mistake when we went live. My wife is a veteran, and I forgot to thank all the veterans out there for their service today on Veterans Day. George says, took a Purple Heart Vietnam vet out for lunch today for Veterans Day. Very cool, George. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, we stood out in the rain during our Veterans Day event this morning at 11 o'clock. My work day is 9 a.m. till 4 p.m., but I put aside the time at 11 o'clock to go. And it's like we got there and we're all standing there and it's just raining, and it's just like, well, here we are. So we got to stand here in Hartwington and get soaking wet. There's pictures of it on my Facebook channel.
I seen those.
It's like you can't tell we're getting soaking wet, but you know.
The one thing I'll say about that is veterans, when they sign up, they don't serve when it's nice and warm and sunny outside only. They
Right.
serve when it's cold, rainy. They serve when it's snowing. They serve when it's hotter than heck. So
Yeah. And that was actually the Master of Ceremonies was actually saying how when he served, Veterans Day didn't really mean anything because it was just another day at work. It wasn't until he came out and became a civilian that the day had any real meaning, because if they're in the military, they're just going. And so yeah, I think when you're looking for training, definitely the best thing is to call. And I will say personally right now in my business, the amount of people who said, because I'm trying to ask and get better about saying, how did you find me? And they're like, you're the first one who called us back. So that's another thing I would look for, is someone who will actually return your phone calls and answer your questions. So those are
Yeah.
some more things.
Let me get some more comments in here. The
Okay.
guy who normally sits in your chair on this day, Tom Walls, is watching and put a
Okay.
comment in. Tom says, just a note, and spoken with no small amount of pride, Belle McCormick is the owner and lead instructor of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. To my knowledge, she is the only such lady in the biz that runs a fixed facility in the country. I
Well,
probably true. I do you know anybody on the East Coast, Brooke?
just me. I mean,
Okay,
this is my classroom. We have my own range. So it's a fixed facility. I don't go anywhere other than here. I don't know what
okay.
else he's referring to.
Tom,
So
you've
yeah.
been corrected.
Well, it depends what his definition of fixed, but I'm like, yeah, no, this is all encompassing here. And it's just small. I don't have a big parking lot, but it's one-on-one and it's private coaching here. So I love it, and I love having the privates because so many times, especially when you're brand new, what happens is you go to a range, there's someone with a 50 cal next to you, there's someone with a 45 next to you. The noise is overwhelming to begin with. So here on my range, we have a 180 range. We can shoot, we can move, we can do around the world drills. I have moving targets, all of those fun things. But really and truly, as fun as all that stuff is, when you are learning, it is always back to the basics. Is how is your sight picture? How is your trigger pull? And the challenge is everyone wants to do the cool stuff. Like my most watched video on YouTube is, me shooting out of a helicopter. That's pretty fun. But you get there by practicing the basics. And whether you talk to Max Michel of the competition world,
Hmm.
um, it's trigger control and it's sight picture. And it really is always that basic stuff to get really good. But you have to get comfortable handling a firearm safely, first and foremost, to be able to get the best out of those classes.
Well, and I would
Because we do.
say, even if we went up to the level of a Jerry Mikulik or a Masada Ayub, it's sight picture, it's trigger control, and that's the very basics. But that's the start of everything.
Right.
We still got comments I've got to get to. Tom
Yeah.
Wall says, "Good for you, Brooke. Good to be corrected." And he
Happy to
also
help.
added, "So shoot like a girl."
Yes, girl and a gun, we have those t-shirts. But,
Larry makes a very good comment here. It's difficult to know what you want when you do not know what you want to ask to know. So who to ask? That includes many certified instructors.
absolutely. And this is just it, is if someone is the right fit for you, when you make that phone call and say, hey, I'm new to firearms and I want to get some training, what do you offer? Again, back to what Paul and I would consider good instructors, they're going to ask you specific questions and they're going to help you understand what you actually are looking for, because pretty much everyone here in Connecticut, because we have to have a pistol permit, a safety course for your pistol permit, they're like, I want self-defense. And I'm like, awesome. What's your shooting experience? And like, nothing. And I'm like, okay, instead of self-defense, let's start with basic gun handling skills. And that's the conversation you have. And there are other instructors who are like, all right, you want to learn self-defense? You never touched a gun before? Let's go. I've got a 45 cal here for you. And unfortunately, like you said, the challenge is you don't know that that's not a good answer.
Yeah.
So there is a challenge with it. But at the same time, if you go to that person and they are able to teach you how to carry 45 right out of the gate, good for them. And if you enjoy it, that's all that really matters. But at least make the phone call.
What I have done in the past is, for people that have truly never fired a firearm before, I will come up with firearms from 22 up to 45 in handguns specifically. If they're interested in self defense, and I'll walk them up the ladder. We find where they're comfortable. We'll start with the 22, then we'll graduate on up. I rank them in order of recoil. We find where they're comfortable, and we work with that. And I find that's what I do not want to do is I do not want to give them a recoil flinch. Those are very, very hard to they can be worked through, and you can get rid of it. It's not cheap, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Well, and so this is where like dry fire comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I think it's overlooked a lot in the self-defense world, whereas in competitors, we know that this is the key to getting rid of scars like that. But this is also why a great start for me is that I start everyone on 22 because I shot 22 for 3 years before I chose to go up because the loud noise, the loud recoil. And here's the thing, I teach everybody the basics are very simple. On a semi-automatic, there's like 3 things you need to know. Where the trigger is, because you want to know where to keep your finger off of, unless your sights are on your target. Where the mag release is, and then where your slide lock is. Once you learn those 3 things, you can load, you can unload, and you can shoot. And it's just one of those things where sometimes we make stuff too complicated. And whether it's on a 22, a 9, a 45, a 380, those 3 pieces are always the same. So I like being cheap and just teaching people on a 22 because they can do it for longer and they don't get as tired. So I always tell people I let them shoot larger calibers because I don't want them to be afraid of them like I was, because I was literally afraid of them. But at the same time, I'm sure you've had the students too where it's like they shoot the 22 and like, oh my gosh, that's like crazy amounts of power. I'm like, yeah, I don't walk those people up to a 9 or a 380.
No, you don't. And believe it or not, the most I personally feel the hardest to control, the most advanced. I wouldn't recommend anybody until they've totally mastered 9mm and 45. Make sure you've done that before you go to 40. 40 flips so much, and it's not a backward recoil; it's an up recoil with the 40. Is what I found at every 40 I've ever shot. It is really it will easily create training scars. I would be that would be the last gun I would ever recommend for somebody buying their first defensive handgun.
Yeah, I do have a unicorn child. Most of my students kind of follow along with me as far as like they'll start with a 22, maybe 380, maybe 9. But I have this one student who started in January and she never shot before, and we did a couple lessons. And like a month later, she comes back. She's got like 3 guns. She's got a 22, a 9, and then like maybe 4 months later, she comes back. She's got a 45. And that's my unicorn student, because most of my students pick a gun. And then I have another student who's been coming to me for 4 years now, almost 5 years now, and she's got a 22 revolver, and she loves it, and that's the only gun she's ever going to shoot because that's the gun she wants. So one of the many posters I have on my wall here are one size never fits all.
Yes.
And I just always want to meet my students where they're at, which is why I love the one-on-one. I'm getting better about doing small classes of like 2 to 4 people, but I really like tailoring it. And the reason it's called a great start is because I want to get you confident with your firearm and then send you somewhere like a Mossad Ayyub or to SIG Academy or Gunsight or any of those other places that are big and for a brand new student can probably be very overwhelming.
Oh yeah. No, you do not want to go to Gunsight if you've. Now, having said that, I've never been to Gunsight
any of those
myself.
places. Well, I've been to SIG, but yeah.
But these advanced places, you do not want to go there if you've never. You want to get familiar first. I want to talk to you a little bit about meeting you where you're at and training from. There's one problem with the training, and it's one small part of the training world. And that are these guys that are just out of the military. They're still in their late 20s, maybe mid 30s at the oldest. Okay?
Right.
And they're going to say, if you can't sprint 100 yards, you need to do that before you can train, because you're not going to be doing any good. I hate to tell you this here, young man, but my sprinting days ended when I left high school, and that has been more than 30 years ago. So get over yourself. I would like to become better with the AR I have. I'd like to become better with the handgun I have. If you can't help me with that, even though I can't sprint 100 yards anymore, you're worthless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is just it, though. Is for some people, that's the perfect thing. It's like they want to do the rah-rah. They want to pretend they're in boot camp. So, I mean, again, a great start shooting school being all pink and like going towards, I market towards women, because I just remember I did not want the dude who was going to make me sprint. I don't want to be in a drill sergeant situation. And again, this is why that simple picking up the phone and calling whoever it is you're considering getting training from will help you have that conversation and find out if it's a good fit. And like I said, I just wish when I had started that someone had suggested that to me. Now, if you're here watching this, chances are you're probably experienced, but maybe not. And even if you are experienced and you want to get your next level of training, I would still make the phone call and verify. Because like I was at SIG, was it this year? Yeah, it was this year. And I emailed back and forth. And I'm like, hey, I'm looking at your women's course, concealed carry. What do I need to know ahead of time? And people are like, well, Brooke, you're an instructor. Don't you know? And I'm like, no, because there's like 5 million different types of instructors. And they have prerequisites, and I hadn't taken their prerequisites. They're like, no, there was ways to get around it. But there's never any dumb questions, especially when you're trying to figure out what are you trying to learn.
Yes.
The ultimate goal that so many people want is self-defense. It's never been my goal. And so I just want skills and drills and to be able to be better, faster, more accurate. And I would say 90% of the trainers out there are save your life with a gun. And that is not everybody's idea. So it's definitely find what fits and what makes sense for you.
Absolutely. And I'm way behind on comments. Let me get a couple
All
of
right,
them.
I'll be quiet.
No. Larry on the Facebook side says, one would be surprised, but shouldn't be, that even a large percentage of shooters still do not actually understand what sight alignment and trigger control is.
Absolutely.
Sight alignment, it's kind of hard to do with the camera here, but it's just, lining up the back sight and the front sight so everything's kind of nice and level. And there you go. That's exactly
so there's your front sight. There's your back sight, right? There you go. It's a little bit hard because it's backwards. I'm trying to fix it in there. So yeah. And here's the thing is sight alignment is easy because you can actually see it and I can show it to you. The part that's even more challenging is that trigger control piece. And there's lots of different ways. So if you watch Lena Michalik and how she does it, and if you watch her dad, Jerry, and how he does it, we are mere mortals. We have not had hundreds of thousands of hours of training to do what they do. But that squeeze, there's a thing, I'm forgetting my friend's name, but it's a bump drill where you put your finger on the trigger, you apply pressure, and you release. But you don't go all the way. And then you just apply a little more, and you come back off. And the whole idea is you are moving your trigger finger without moving your sights. And when you can do that, and this is how we split cards in half on the range. And I'm not talking, we're splitting cards this way with a bump drill at the end of a training day. And it's just amazing what we can do. And so many people think that is trigger control, and it's generally not. Now, can people slap the trigger and be successful? Absolutely. Again, that's going to be a Max Michel of the world, not a Brooke Cheney who does some dry fire, but not a ton. So
I wish I could give a good visual example, but it's way over there, and I don't want to leave the camera and leave you up solo talking alone for long enough to get it. But one example I had explained to me early on in my shooting to explain trigger control and reset and trigger reset was a click ballpoint pen.
Mm-hmm.
And you can when you can click the ballpoint pen and then you click it all the way down and just release it enough so you can feel the click that it's ready to be clicked again. That usually with most ballpoint pens happens before you extend it all the way out. Same with most semi-automatic handguns. Usually there's a reset before the trigger goes all the way out.
Right.
And
so the way I explain what you're talking about is when if this is the trigger, when your sights are on target, your finger's on the trigger, this first part that's kind of squishy, I call that the mechanical part, right? This is the slack, right? So now there's resistance, and this is, like you said, just like the trigger. Now this is where you're applying pressure until it goes click. And then the reset is just like Paul said, just to where, and look how tiny that movement is. The less you move the trigger, the more accurate you're going to be on, and faster. And this is like the coolest part is like, here's the mechanical slack. Oops, I went too far. So wait a second. So here's the squishy part, and then there's resistance. And then you just apply pressure without moving your sights. There's a click. And to reset that trigger, it only has to go a tiny bit. It doesn't have to go all the way. And just that one finite little change of you just paying attention to that reset on your trigger and staying on your sights when the gun goes bang, and when it comes back down, you are still focused on those sights, not looking over your gun to see your target. That's been a big thing this past week is click, wait, what is it? And I'm like, oh, if you were a golfer, you'd be shanking so hard right now. So, but yeah, the whole reset and the follow through. It is.
Yeah, the CNT.
Sorry, I'm reading what CNT said.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it is, and I tell my students all the time, it's like this little tiny movement, this is totally the thing you're going to be working on improving for the rest of your firearms life, because it can always be a little bit better. It can always be a little bit smoother. And then, oh, God forbid, you actually change the gun you're shooting, because each gun has a different trigger. Yes. And this is one of the cool things training with Kay, was that I thought if you were an awesome shooter, you could pick up any gun and be an awesome shooter. And not that Kay Mikulik is not an awesome shooter with any gun she picks up, but I had brought a gun. I'm not going to say what kind it was. But she pulled the trigger. She's like, oh my God, that's total garbage. And she can still shoot it, but it's just like that finesse of understanding the difference between a crunchy trigger versus a smooth trigger versus a long trigger pull, like a double action revolver, versus the crisp little click of a 1911. And it's just like, as you're learning all of these things, it's like, it's still the same mechanics, but it's something you really have to practice. And this is where dry fire just makes such a huge difference as far as, yes, going to the range and putting lead down range is helpful, but like Lena says, actually, earn your ammo. Do 10 reps of dry fire for every bullet. So if you have a training goal, you want to do dry fire, do 10 reps of something, put one piece of live ammo aside. Do another 10, put another piece. So you're earning your live fire. Because if you just go put lead down range, it doesn't improve you necessarily.
It's fun. It can be very expensive, but yeah, every time I draw, well, and I'm lucky enough I belong to a range where I can draw. But every time I draw, my goal is to get better. And so,
right.
Larry says, speaking of trigger control, that is because you're moving your trigger finger properly placed on the trigger and not also additionally squeezing the grip, I believe, with the rest of your hand. Is what he's trying to say. And that's exactly it, is controlling one finger opposite of 4 others.
Right.
So.
And the thing is, too, is like one size never fits all. I've been taught lots of different ways to grip, and I share them with my students, but it's just And this is why you have to practice. Because if you don't do the dry fire and you're not building that same grip and you're not playing and registering and paying attention to what you're doing. So like doing 10 rounds of dry fire of some skill, like you're talking about drawing, and we break it up into lots of little pieces where it's like the buzzer goes off, you get to the gun. That's it. And then the buzzer goes off, you're on the gun, you go to the draw. Stuff like that. And people don't understand how to break stuff down in little tiny pieces. So that's another one of those training tips is pick a thing. Don't try to do draw on target, pull the trigger, and get it all done. Pick one piece. Just work on that trigger control and watching those sights. And depending on what kind of gun you have, there's lots of different tools and stuff. Squishy, a technical term. Yes, it's very, I love squishy. I'm very, very technical. It's like I'll be in school and, you know, it's the thing that goes to the thing that does the thing. And it's one of my favorite things. Like Tatiana Whitlock actually is another great trainer that I love for Girl and a Gun. She's the national coordinator for that. And she literally had a shirt made up that says, do the thing that does the thing, or something along those lines. Because we don't have to be technical when we're talking about this stuff, because we want to be relatable.
Yes.
So people, marksmen, don't feel like they have to know all the pieces and parts.
Well, and let me make it, and we're over time, so we got to get out of here pretty soon, but let me make a distinction. If you're training somebody to use something properly, you don't need to be super technical. Where I draw the line, and I want them to be absolutely incredibly technical, and I want them to know what the hell they're talking about, is if they're like in the California legislature and the best thing they can come up with is the shoulder thing that goes up. That's not good enough.
No. But that, yeah, I don't even want to go there.
Let me see. One more comment from DJ here real quick. DJ says, I love the trigger break on my Smith & Wesson Model 15 in single action. Hashtag glass break.
Right. And some people love that kind of trigger pull and other people can't stand it. And that's just it, is my big thing. Like I have a Find Your Perfect Gun class here. And it was so funny because one of my students came through. And what I do in this class is I introduce them to semi-automatic revolvers. And then we start breaking it down based on, do they like the grip? Do they like the sights? What do they like about the trigger? What don't they like about it? And then when we shoot stuff, what do they like about shooting it? And they leave me, not with me telling them, oh, go buy a blank. They leave with, oh, I like fiber optic sights. I like the shorts, you know, a 1911. And I like a 22 or a 9. So I've got a list that they get to go to the gun store with. Well, one guy came back with a Glock. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I don't like Glocks. He's like, why didn't you tell me? And I'm like, dude, it's not about me. That's the whole point. And so many people, I don't know, is G-Webs out there? Mr. 45 only?
Yeah. You know what, though? Because he was asked, let me get a couple more. Let me bring that comment up to start with. That was his original comment. 500 Magnum asked him, what caliber is that in, DJ? And DJ answered, 38 Special.
Yeah. And it's just like, and 38 Special is great out of a full-size revolver. I don't like it out of the little itty-bitty ones.
Oh, that's a topic for another show. That's
so that's no fun. But anyway, I love my 38 Special that my husband has. This is a full-size gun. But anyway, I know you said we're over, so...
Yeah, we've got Women for Gun Rights coming up in just a few minutes on the channel, so we got to get out of here. Tom gave you his stamp of approval. He says, well done, ma'am. Would love to shoot with you sometime.
Well, thank you. By all means, if you're in Connecticut, give me a call. I have a private range we can play on. I got a play rag, I got a Texas Star, I got things that move and up and down and stuff. So, yeah, we can have lots of fun.
Tom, get out to Connecticut, or Brooke, get out to Central Coastal Washington is where Tom is. Firearms Academy Seattle is not in Seattle. It's if you draw a line between Seattle and Portland, put a dot right in the middle of that line. That's where the Firearms Academy Seattle is.
Gotcha.
Brooke, on our way out, anything you want to plug? Anything you want to talk about briefly?
Oh, all right. So let's see, briefly, really quick. I am getting my own TV show. on CT Politics TV. And that's starting up in December and January, I believe. It's something new and different. I'm going to be on Roku, stuff like that. Tonight is Friday. Tomorrow night is Saturday, which at 9 p.m. Eastern, I do Suicide Prevention Saturday because I am a violence prevention and suicide prevention advocate. So I just jump on and talk about stuff that people don't want to talk about. Other than that, by all means, go join the DC Project at dcproject.info. And is that quick enough?
Yeah, absolutely. DJ's helping you out here. He put the link for your YouTube channel up. And for you folks on OpsLens or Facebook, if you want that link, head on over to the YouTube page for Polite Society Podcast. That's where that's at. Brooke, fantastic job today. And these 35 minutes now just always fly by too fast.
They do.
So that's going to wrap it up. That's going to wrap it up for this week of 5 p.m. broadcast. Do please come join me tomorrow at noon Central Time when we have the weekend edition of the Bullet, another week in review. Gee, do we have elections or something like that to talk about? So we'll be covering that tomorrow, noon Central Time. Come join us. And until then, everybody, thanks for watching. Podcast listeners, thanks for listening.